Jimi Hendrix, and he took his advice and booked the Jimi Hendrix experience at Monterey. So it was kind of on a highest level of recommendation you could ever imagine.
For decades, the connection between Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix has been the subject of intense speculation, admiration, and mystery. Two of the greatest guitarists to ever walk the earth, their relationship has often been shrouded in silence, with Clapton keeping his thoughts on Hendrix close to his chest. But now, after years of keeping quiet, Eric Clapton has finally spoken out. In an exclusive interview, Clapton opens up about Jimi Hendrix, his genius, their bond, and the untold story behind their iconic collaboration. What did Clapton really think of Hendrix? The truth will shock you. The unspoken rivalry. The world has always viewed Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix as two of the greatest guitarists to ever play. But what many didn't know was that behind their admiration for each other was an unspoken rivalry. Clapton, who had already made a name for himself with the Yardbirds and Cream, was a guitar legend in his own right. But when Hendrix arrived on the scene, he turned the world of music upside down, leaving Clapton and the rest of the music world stunned by his raw talent and revolutionary approach to the guitar. Clapton, known for his measured, blues-infused playing, found himself confronted by Hendrix's fiery, improvisational style. In the interview, Clapton confessed that when he first saw Hendrix perform, it was a moment of both awe and self-doubt. "I thought, I'm done," Clapton admitted with a rueful smile. Jimi had this magic, this raw energy that was unlike anything I had ever heard. I was in awe, but I was also terrified. Here was someone who could take what I had done and make it sound like something completely new. The rivalry wasn't one born of animosity, but of mutual respect. Clapton realized that Hendrix wasn't just playing guitar, he was redefining it. The tension between the two guitar gods was palpable. Clapton, whose solos had been groundbreaking in the 60s, now found himself in the shadow of Hendrix's untamed brilliance. "I'd spent years perfecting my craft, and here comes this guy who just seemed to do it effortlessly," Clapton said. "I didn't know whether to be inspired or to feel threatened, but in the end, it was the inspiration that won out." Despite the rivalry, Clapton never saw Hendrix as a threat in the way that fans or critics often did. For Clapton, Hendrix was a challenge, but one that spurred him to push the boundaries of his own playing. As Clapton continued to speak about Hendrix, he described how their relationship was rooted in mutual admiration. Though there was competition, it was always respectful. We both knew we were on different paths, but we had the same ultimate goal: to push the guitar to places no one had ever imagined, Clapton reflected. Their interactions, Clapton says, were always filled with respect for each other's musical gifts, but there was also a subtle competition that drove them both to greater heights. "We talk about guitars, and sometimes we just play together, trying to outdo each other," Clapton laughed. But at the end of the day, there was no denying it. Jimi was a different kind of animal. The collaboration that changed everything. While the rivalry between Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix was undeniable, there was one moment in time when the two icons came together in a musical collaboration that forever changed the world of guitar. Clapton recounts the legendary moment when he and Hendrix shared the stage for the first time, creating a bond that transcended competition and rivalries. The collaboration was brief, but it left a lasting impact on both musicians, and on the history of rock and roll itself. The night of their first jam session together is etched in Clapton's memory as one of the most electrifying experiences of his life. "I had heard about Jimi for a while before we met, and I had already seen him play. But when we finally got on stage together, it was magic," Clapton recalled. "It was as if the universe had opened up and said, 'Here, take this moment. You're witnessing something that's never happened before.'" The two guitarists, who had been playing different styles of rock, fused their approaches in a way that the audience had never heard before. The result was a performance that was pure, unfiltered musical brilliance. A combination of Clapton's blues-based style and Hendrix's psychedelic virtuosic playing. The energy in the room that night was palpable, and Clapton describes how the music seemed to take on a life of its own. "We were feeding off each other," Clapton said, his voice filled with reverence. "There was no competition, no ego. It was just two musicians, lost in the music, trying to elevate each other to a higher level." The crowd that night witnessed something extraordinary, two of the greatest guitarists of their generation, creating a performance that was as much about the connection between them as it was about the music itself. But it wasn't just the audience that was in awe. Clapton himself was floored by the experience. Jimmy was just on a different level, he said. His ability to improvise, to play with such raw emotion, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. He had a kind of freedom in his playing that I could never quite reach. It was like he was channeling something from another world. For Clapton, the collaboration with Hendrix was a humbling experience, one that taught him the importance of spontaneity and feeling in music. Despite the magic of their collaboration, Clapton admits that there was an underlying sense of competition between them that could never be fully erased. Jimmy's playing was so fluid, so effortless, and I couldn't help but think, I need to push harder. I need to be better, Clapton confessed. But even in the face of competition, Clapton acknowledges that Hendrix brought out the best in him. Jimmy was like a mirror for me, Clapton said. When I played with him, I could see my own weaknesses and strengths in a way that I couldn't see on my own. It made me better. The brief moments of collaboration between Clapton and Hendrix are considered some of the most magical moments in rock history. And although their paths diverged after their short-lived time together, the impact of their musical relationship was undeniable. For Clapton, the collaboration with Hendrix was more than just a jam session. It was a moment of transcendence, a brief time when two guitar legends collided to create something truly extraordinary. The guitar genius Eric Clapton couldn't escape. As much as Eric Clapton tried to carve his own identity in the world of guitar, Jimi Hendrix's shadow loomed large over him. Even after their legendary collaboration, Clapton couldn't escape the fact that Hendrix's innovative approach to the instrument had forever altered the landscape of rock and roll. Clapton had already established himself as one of the greatest guitarists of his time, but Hendrix was a force that could not be ignored. His unique style, transcendent solos, and groundbreaking techniques challenged everything Clapton thought he knew about the guitar. Clapton admits that for years, Hendrix's influence haunted him in ways he never expected. Jimmy came along and completely changed the game, Clapton confessed. He had this ability to make the guitar sound like an extension of himself. He was playing things that I had never even imagined were possible. It was humbling, but it was also inspiring. Clapton acknowledges that Hendrix made him reconsider his own approach to the instrument. While Clapton had always been known for his emotional and bluesy guitar playing, Hendrix brought a level of experimentation that Clapton hadn't thought to explore. The use of feedback, distortion, and a mastery of improvisation were just some of the ways Hendrix revolutionized the guitar world. I had my style, but Jimmy opened up a new world for me. He was the definition of freedom on the guitar. But as Clapton describes, Hendrix was more than just a musical genius. He was a pioneer who defied the traditional boundaries of guitar playing. He didn't follow any rules, Clapton said, reflecting on how Hendrix's playing was so unconventional, yet so effortlessly captivating. He was a natural. It wasn't like he had to think about what he was doing. He just played. Clapton found himself in awe of Hendrix's ability to break the rules while still creating something completely unique. It was a level of mastery that Clapton admits was difficult to comprehend, and even harder to match. For Clapton, the greatest challenge wasn't just keeping up with Hendrix's talent. It was learning how to evolve as a guitarist in the face of such an overwhelming influence. Jimmy pushed me to take risks, to step outside of my comfort zone. He was like a constant reminder that the guitar was limitless, Clapton shared. But it wasn't easy. It made me question everything I thought I knew about playing. The competition wasn't just musical, it was personal. He was a mirror that made me look at myself and my own playing in ways I didn't want to. Clapton's respect for Hendrix grew even more as he realized that he wasn't just competing with the sound, but with the sheer passion and originality that Hendrix brought to the stage every night. Yet, despite the overwhelming influence Hendrix had on Clapton, Clapton recognizes that it was this very influence that pushed him to new heights as a guitarist. If Jimmy hadn't come along, I don't think I would have pushed myself as hard, Clapton admitted. He raised the bar in a way that no one else could. I had to keep up, and in doing so, I ended up becoming a better musician. But that doesn't mean it was easy. There was always a part of me that felt like I was playing catch-up. Clapton's admiration for Hendrix was undeniable, but so was the weight of his genius. It's clear that, in many ways, Hendrix didn't just shape Clapton's playing, he reshaped Clapton's entire understanding of what it meant to be a guitar legend. The deep bond. While the musical rivalry and admiration between Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix are well documented, the personal connection the two shared remains one of the most fascinating aspects of their relationship. Despite their differences in style and approach, Clapton reveals a side of Hendrix that many never saw. A man who was not just a guitar genius, but a deeply complex, vulnerable individual. Clapton, who had spent his career in the spotlight, saw Hendrix in a way that few others did. They were not just colleagues or competitors. They were two musicians who, in many ways, understood each other better than anyone else. Clapton recalls their conversations in private moments, where they bonded over their shared struggles. "Jimmy and I were very similar in many ways," Clapton said, reflecting on their friendship. "We both came from difficult backgrounds, and we both had to fight for our place in the music world. There was a mutual understanding that went beyond the music." Clapton reveals that while the world saw Hendrix as a larger-than-life figure, the man himself was often plagued by self-doubt and insecurity. Jimmy was often searching for validation. He was always seeking something more, Clapton shared. He wasn't the confident, untouchable figure that people thought he was. He had his own demons, just like the rest of us. Despite the pressure of fame and the intensity of their careers, Clapton and Hendrix found solace in each other's company. "We didn't have to speak much to understand each other," Clapton said. "There was an unspoken bond between us, something that came from the shared experience of being musicians who had been thrown into the limelight at a very young age." Clapton recalls that at times, their bond was more about camaraderie than competition. "We both knew how hard it was to navigate the world of fame. We knew the toll it took on you, and we both appreciated the fact that we had each other's support, even if it was just through music." Clapton also reveals that he and Hendrix often confided in one another about the loneliness of being at the top. "The higher you go, the more isolated you become," Clapton admitted. "Jimmy and I would talk about how lonely it could be, how the pressure from the public, the media, and even our own bands could make us feel like we were in a box we couldn't escape." Clapton says that these conversations were a reminder that, despite their fame and success, both of them were human, struggling with the same pressures and insecurities that anyone could relate to. It was in these quiet moments of mutual understanding that their bond grew stronger, beyond the music and beyond the spotlight. But despite their closeness, Clapton admits that there was always a sense of inevitability to their relationship. "There was a kind of unspoken agreement between us. Both of us knew that our paths would eventually diverge," Clapton reflected. "Jimmy was his own force of nature, and I was on my own path. But there was no animosity between us, just mutual respect." Clapton says that when Hendrix died tragically at the age of 27, it left a hole in his life that could never be filled. "I lost a friend, a fellow musician, and a part of myself," Clapton said, his voice tinged with emotion. "Jimmy was someone I admired, but he was also someone I understood in a way that most people never will." The loss of Hendrix marked a turning point for Clapton, both musically and personally. While Clapton went on to continue his own successful career, Hendrix's death left a lasting impact on him. "Jimmy's death was a reminder that nothing in this business is guaranteed," Clapton said. "It made me appreciate every moment, every note, and every performance. I've carried that with me ever since." How Jimi Hendrix shaped his music. The influence of Jimi Hendrix on Eric Clapton's music is undeniable. But it's not just about technique. It's about a shift in Clapton's entire approach to playing the guitar. While Clapton had already established himself as a world-class guitarist, Hendrix's arrival completely changed the way Clapton thought about his instrument. The way Hendrix manipulated sound, broke rules, and invented new ones pushed Clapton to challenge his own boundaries, leaving an indelible mark on his music for years to come. Clapton admits that after hearing Hendrix, he felt both inspired and daunted. "Jimmy showed me that there were no boundaries in music," Clapton reflected. "He played the guitar in ways that I never would have thought possible. His use of distortion, feedback, and improvisation opened up a whole new world for me. I realized that I could push my own playing further than I had ever imagined." Hendrix's ability to turn the guitar into an emotional extension of himself forced Clapton to take risks in his own playing. Clapton, known for his more traditional blues style, found himself experimenting with new sounds and techniques that he hadn't explored before. The impact of Hendrix on Clapton's music didn't just stop with technique. It was also about the emotional intensity that Hendrix brought to his playing. Clapton acknowledges that Hendrix's music had a rawness and a vulnerability that he admired deeply. "Jimmy had this way of pouring his soul into the guitar," Clapton said, his voice filled with reverence. When he played, it was as though the guitar was an instrument for his innermost emotions. He didn't just play for the crowd, he played for himself. That's something I try to bring to my own music now. Hendrix's influence can be heard in Clapton's work from that point forward. Even in the years after Hendrix's death, Clapton continued to experiment with the more liberated, exploratory style that Hendrix had pioneered. It wasn't just about the notes, it was about the feeling, the freedom, Clapton explained. "Jimmy made me realize that music is about expression, not just technical ability. It's about connecting with the audience on an emotional level, and that's something that I learned from him." But as much as Hendrix inspired Clapton, it also made him reconsider his place in the music world. "Jimmy made me question everything I knew about playing," Clapton admitted. "He was on another level. I had to ask myself, can I push myself further? Can I be as bold, as daring as he was?" It was both intimidating and motivating. Clapton reflects that it wasn't just about playing the guitar better. It was about approaching music with a new mindset, one that valued freedom over tradition. Even as Clapton continued his career in the decades that followed, he never lost sight of Hendrix's influence on his music. "Jimmy changed the way I thought about the guitar, and I'm grateful for that," Clapton said. "He pushed me to be better, to do things I hadn't done before. And that's the greatest gift any musician can give to another. The dark side of genius. While Jimi Hendrix's brilliance as a guitarist was widely recognized, there was a darker side to his genius, one that Clapton witnessed firsthand, and that would forever change the way he saw the pressures of fame. Hendrix's struggles with fame, mental health, and substance abuse were well known, but Clapton was one of the few musicians who understood the toll that fame could take on someone who was constantly in the spotlight. Clapton recounts the times when he saw Hendrix battling personal demons, struggling to manage the fame that had exploded around him. "Jimmy was a true genius, but like many geniuses, he was fragile," Clapton shared, his voice tinged with sadness. The fame, the expectations, the pressure, it was overwhelming for him. He didn't always know how to handle it, and I think that's part of what made him so special. His vulnerability was part of his genius. Clapton admits that watching Hendrix grapple with these challenges left a lasting impact on him, teaching him about the price of fame in a way that few others could understand. Hendrix, Clapton reflects, was often conflicted by the demands placed on him as a musical icon. While his fame brought him adoration from millions of fans, it also brought a level of isolation that Clapton saw in him during their private moments. "There were times when he'd talk to me about how lonely it was, how people saw him as this untouchable figure, but he didn't feel like that inside," Clapton said. "He wasn't just a rock star to me. He was a person, a guy struggling to make sense of it all. He felt trapped by his own success." Clapton's own battles with addiction and depression made him particularly attuned to Hendrix's struggles. "We were both caught in that world where fame can consume you," Clapton said. "It's easy to get lost in it, and for Jimmy, I think it was too much. He never really had a chance to process everything that was happening to him. He was just being swept along by the current of his own success." Clapton says that the more he saw Hendrix struggle with his personal issues, the more he realized how fragile the music industry's glamorous exterior really was. Behind the fame, there were real people, real vulnerabilities, and real pain. Watching Hendrix's descent into self-destructive behavior was a harsh wake-up call for Clapton, who recognized that he, too, had to grapple with the darker side of fame. "Jimmy's struggles made me realize that no amount of success could ever fill that void," Clapton said, reflecting on his own battles with addiction. "We were both running from something, and music was the thing that kept us going. But the pressure was immense, and I don't think either of us ever really figured out how to deal with it." In the end, Clapton's relationship with Hendrix was a lesson in the complexities of genius, fame, and the personal sacrifices that come with both. While their musical collaboration was groundbreaking, their private conversations and shared experiences left a far deeper impression on Clapton. Jimmy's struggles made me think about fame in a completely different way, Clapton admitted. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the cost of being in the spotlight and how it can tear you apart if you're not careful. How Clapton keeps his memory alive. Jimi Hendrix's untimely death at the age of 27 left an irreplaceable void in the music world, but his legacy has lived on through the generations of musicians he influenced, including Eric Clapton. Despite their brief time together, Clapton has never stopped carrying the torch for Hendrix's memory, constantly reflecting on the impact Hendrix had on his own music and the world at large. Clapton continues to celebrate the life and artistry of Hendrix, not just as a fellow musician, but as a close friend who challenged him to be better, and in doing so, transformed his own approach to guitar and performance. Clapton admits that Hendrix's legacy is something he thinks about often, especially in his own musical work. Jimmy left behind a legacy that no one could ever replicate, Clapton said. His playing, his energy, his attitude, it was something completely unique. What I try to do is carry that influence with me. Every time I pick up my guitar, I hear Jimmy's voice in my head, telling me to push further, to take risks, and to never be afraid to play from the heart. Clapton has made it clear that while he has continued to build his own legacy, Hendrix's influence is always there, guiding his musical choices and the way he approaches his art. Over the years, Clapton has taken part in numerous tributes to Hendrix, keeping his spirit alive in a way that feels personal. From performing tribute concerts to sharing stories of their time together, Clapton has never allowed Hendrix's brilliance to be forgotten. Clapton recalls the first time he played Hendrix's music live after his death, describing it as a deeply emotional moment. It was difficult, Clapton confessed. There's no one who could play his music like he did, but I wanted to honor him. I wanted to play his songs with the same passion and energy that he put into them. Even today, Clapton often references Hendrix as an inspiration in interviews and in his own performances. Jimmy was the bar, Clapton said. He raised the level for all of us, and I think it's important for me to always remember that. I've been lucky to have had my own career, but it's Jimmy's influence that keeps me grounded. He's always been my benchmark. Clapton's respect for Hendrix is evident in the way he continues to celebrate his memory, always with humility, always with a sense of awe, and always with the knowledge that Hendrix was the guitarist who redefined the possibilities of the instrument. Hendrix's legacy also plays a role in how Clapton sees himself within the broader context of rock history. I never considered myself to be the best, Clapton said. There are people who play faster, people who play more technically, but Jimmy was a force of nature. He wasn't just a great guitarist, he was a great artist, and that's the difference. His music transcended the guitar. He was able to take it to places no one had even dreamed of, and that's why we all still talk about him today. Clapton's reverence for Hendrix is not just about his technical prowess, it's about the way Hendrix redefined what it meant to be a true musical visionary. Even now, as Clapton reflects on his own career and his relationship with Hendrix, he acknowledges the profound impact the legendary guitarist had on shaping him not only as a musician, but also as a person. Jimmy taught me to never settle for less, to always keep pushing forward, Clapton said. And that's something I carry with me every day. The final word. As the years go by, Eric Clapton continues to reflect on the brief but intense bond he shared with Jimi Hendrix. For Clapton, Hendrix wasn't just a fellow guitarist or a rival. He was a friend, a mentor, and a figure whose influence shaped Clapton's entire career. In the final moments of their time together, Clapton says that Hendrix taught him not just how to play, but how to truly live in the moment, to embrace the freedom that comes with music, and to always push beyond the limits of what's possible. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Clapton spoke about the emotional toll that Hendrix's death had on him. When Jimmy died, I was devastated, Clapton admitted. He was someone who challenged me, inspired me, and made me feel like we were part of a special generation of musicians. Losing him was like losing a piece of myself. Clapton recalls the feeling of being at a crossroads in his own career, suddenly left to pick up the pieces of the music world without Hendrix by his side. It felt like the end of an era. The way we played, the way we thought about music, it was all changing. And when Jimmy was gone, I knew that part of that magic was gone with him. But as Clapton reflects on their friendship, he remains deeply grateful for the time they spent together and the lessons Hendrix left behind. Jimmy showed me what it meant to break boundaries, Clapton said. He wasn't afraid to take risks, to play from the heart, to make mistakes and turn them into something beautiful. That's the lesson I carry with me to this day. Clapton's final thoughts on Hendrix reveal not just a deep admiration for his musical genius, but a recognition of the friendship and mentorship that went beyond the stage. Jimmy taught me that it's not about being the best. It's about being true to yourself and the music. That's something I'll never forget. In many ways, Clapton's career can be seen as a direct continuation of Hendrix's legacy. While their styles may have been different, their approach to guitar playing, their willingness to push the limits, to be emotionally raw and to take chances, remains the same. As Clapton looks back on his own musical journey, he knows that without Hendrix's influence, his own path would have been very different. Jimmy was the spark, Clapton said. He lit the fire for all of us. Eric Clapton's reflection on Jimi Hendrix is more than just a tribute to a musical icon. It's a testament to the deep, enduring connection between two of the greatest guitarists in history. Hendrix's influence on Clapton's playing and life remains a powerful force, one that continues to inspire new generations of musicians. Their brief collaboration, their shared moments of brilliance, and their friendship left a mark on rock and roll that will never fade. What's your take on their relationship? Do you think Clapton would have been the same without Hendrix's influence? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of music's greatest legends.